Hello and welcome wherever you are around the world and whatever time of day you have. Today for Ask an Atheist, I'm very pleased to have Harris Sultan joining me. And here he is. Hello, Harris. How the devil
Hi.
are you?
I am very good, thank you. I'm doing excellent, and thank you for inviting me again.
Good, good. Yes, it's the wonders of the internet, isn't it? You're in Australia and I'm in the UK, but it's still working.
Yeah, it's just the time difference. I think I am a night owl now, so it's 10 o'clock, and I believe it's probably daytime. You're 8 hours behind, so it's 2 p.m. Monday morning, Monday afternoon.
You're 11 hours ahead, so I'm on my mid-morning coffee. It's 11 a.m. here.
Oh wow, okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So we're going to try and focus on Islamophobia in this Ask an Atheist. Now, it's always difficult because, of course, the audience, and we are building quite an audience already, I see, they have their own agenda. They want to ask their own questions, and they may or may not be related to the topic we're trying to focus on. Never mind. We'll do our best. So what do you think Islamophobia is, Harris?
Well, I sound like a broken record, but I think we have made the case pretty well, and so it's obviously not me who came up with that, but a lot of people before me have come up with a very good narrative that actually makes sense. It all comes down to separating the ideas from people, and I reckon it was when this term was coined, it was coined with good intentions, because there is. Obviously, there's genuine bigotry towards any group that is foreign to people, and that's what happened with Islam, with Muslims as well, especially after 9/11, and when in this age of free flowing information, people can share their ideas, people can talk about their ideas, and xenophobia went up, etc. So. It is true that there is a anti-Muslim bigotry, or Islamophobia. That would have been a better term, but not Islamophobia. But I think Muslims are to be blamed in that as well, because Muslims do tend to identify themselves as Islam itself. They tie their identity with Islam. They are so emotionally attached to it that they believe it is, if you attack Islam, you're attacking them per se. But it's our job to obviously tell us, and not only just them, but everyone else as well, who's not so invested in this topic, that criticizing Islam is not Islamophobia. Attacking or targeting Muslims as people, that is something that we should all avoid, and we should speak up against. So that's what Islamophobia is in a nutshell, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. It's somewhat peculiar to Islam as a religion, because it is much more linked to the identity of the person than, for example, Christianity is. You can call yourself a Christian and never go to church. So it's very much a lukewarm sort of religion, certainly in my part of the world. But I believe Islamophobia began following the 2001 atrocity, the Twin Towers.
I think the term came a little bit later, but obviously initially it was United States just going after the terrorists, Islamists, jihadis, whatever you want to call them, and then after that, obviously, like everything, nothing ever remains the same. Things change. So initially, after the first few years, and then obviously Iraq War didn't help either. That because I moved to Australia when I was 19, so in 2003. Before that, I was in Pakistan when this happened, and I was a young, impressionable teenager. And the common notion was this is a war by infidel America against Muslims, and attacking Iraq obviously didn't help the case. But eventually, after all that crying victim over and over again, and then eventually people in the West, the liberals of the West, also realize, okay, well, there's something going wrong with this, and I guess that's when people started talking about it. That's when the topic got diversified, and people thought, okay, maybe there's more to it than just, bad guys in the East who follow a different religion and they all want to kill us.
Yeah, well, there is a tendency. I don't know whether it's a human tendency or an American tendency or whatever, but there's a tendency to polarize things and see them in terms of black or white, no middle grays. And this is ridiculous because there's vast millions of Muslims who are very good people, very reasonable. I live with one. One of my household is not a very practicing, but he's labeled a Muslim in his passport at least. So this is the problem, isn't it? We don't really want to polarize everything and label people according to the ideas of their fundamental end. That's where it's going wrong.
Well, yeah. But having said that, I think obviously mostly people go on extreme right or extreme left, or on the other ends. But majority of people still lie in the middle. I think either that is due to lack of interest or lack of information, whatever that might be. But majority of people sit in the middle. They're the fence sitters. That is the biggest population on any given topic. But I think that is also a very useless position because they never bring about any change. It's either people on these two extremes. They're always the ones who are actually fighting with each other and pushing the agenda forward, and then they're the ones who end up bringing a change.
Yes. Now here's an odd thing, because although we have a word Islamophobia, we don't seem to have a word Christianophobia, do we?
Well, I think we need to popularize other terms like that. Funny that you actually said that. Again, this was a bad PR move by Islamic apologists or people who were sympathetic towards Muslims who were trying to defend the honor of Islam. However that came about, but this is a farce. This is a big display of hypocrisy, because in all these Muslim countries, unfortunately, minorities, I mean, people who are familiar with my work, I do run a YouTube channel, a couple of YouTube channels. Yeah. One of them is obviously named after me, Sultan. That's in English, and every week I cover at least 3 to 4 stories of non-Muslims in Pakistan getting persecuted. Just a couple of days ago, I'm not sure if you've seen the video where this Christian woman was slapped around, beaten around by so-called moderate Muslims, by nurses and doctors who had worked alongside her for many years. And her crime was, obviously, initially we thought that, she was accused of blasphemy. In most cases, we think, okay, well, who would, in their right mind, would say anything about Muhammad in a country like Pakistan, for instance? Yes. But now just another video came out in which women were accusing her. Her only crime was that she was going to sick people, because she was also a nurse. She was going to sick people and saying, call out to Jesus, because Jesus will help you out. And that was perceived by the so-called moderate Muslims, her colleagues who were nurses and doctors, to accuse her of blasphemy, to take it as blasphemy. And they started beating her. It's on my Twitter. You can see the video. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking. So that's just Christians. And then obviously there are tons of Hindu girls who get kidnapped, forcefully converted to Islam, to much older men. And once they're done with them, they end up discarding them. Young Hindu men are found hanging by mango trees or some sort of a tree, and then they say, well, it was they committed suicide. So all of these things are happening, and I think we need to popularize the term, like a kaphrophobia or something, because not just Hindus and Christians, but also atheists as well.
Well, nobody's perfect, certainly not at the extreme end of whatever ideology they've signed up to. Yes. Now, the situation in some of the liberal countries is that we find non-Muslims are now protecting the rights of Islamic conventions, like wearing the hijab, for the Muslims. This is a strange state of affairs, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I can understand it comes from a good position, because I definitely feel the same way about minorities of Pakistan, for instance.
Mm.
I want the Sikhs of Pakistan to proudly wear the turban, or Pakistani Hindus to proudly wear the saris and the red dot that they put in.
Yes.
Obviously, I don't buy into any of that as far as the realities of the universe are concerned, and I would find any dogma bad for our society just as
Yeah.
much as Islam is. Islam is probably a little bit worse because it is inherently political and has a
Yes.
lot of violence in that. But
Mm.
but protecting your minorities who you feel are oppressed, you tend to speak up for them and you tend to stand up for them. So
Yes.
I can understand that why Western liberals want to protect their Muslim minorities, and they should.
Yes.
But the only problem comes is me protecting or me supporting a Pakistani Hindu to be able to wear a sari or to be able to wear a red dot.
Mm.
That is more so cultural for them, obviously religious as well, and
Mm.
religion and cultures are usually tied to each other.
Yes.
But hijab cannot be actually seen like that. I'm all for people being allowed to have their mosques. People should be allowed to go to their mosques and go to
Yeah.
their places of worship and do whatever they want in their private
Yeah.
lives. But and even those women who want to wear a hijab, there should be no discrimination against that.
Yes.
But from
Somebody's.
a neutral,
Can I just say, somebody's pointed out that the Queen of England likes to wear a headscarf.
yeah, yeah, that's fine. So you should be able to wear it. But again, the only problem with hijab is, as I say, these modern lipstick Muslim women say that hijab is my choice. They may think it's their choice, but have a look at this. The three reasons why a woman chooses to wear hijabs. Number one, it's either it's obviously a societal pressure. Either it's a societal pressure. If they're, for example, if they are in Iran, you have to wear it, or you have to face the consequences. Or
Yes.
in countries like Pakistan,
Even if you're a visitor to Iran.
yeah.
Mm.
Or it's a family pressure. For example, in countries like Pakistan, where you legally don't have to wear it, but there is still a societal pressure. But you can still go around wearing jeans or not wear a hijab, but you are classified as a loose woman, so to speak, as they like
Yes.
to call that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so that there's a pressure from family as well. We
Yes.
have seen plenty of such cases. Or third, the most important one, if you don't have the former two, the third one is you will burn in hell for not being an obedient, good, decent Muslim woman to obey Allah. So tell me, where is freedom in that? Obviously, there's no freedom in that. Fair enough. What we can do, we can't obviously tell people that your God is, your God doesn't exist, and that it doesn't work that way. We know that. So
Yeah.
at least what we should do is we should recognize the first two problems, that that there are societal and family pressures.
Yes.
If they don't exist, then the third one is obviously a religious pressure, but that is obviously entirely up to the individual.
Mm.
But as far as Western liberals are concerned, they should hold Muslim women to the same level as they would hold themselves. They would not expect a white woman to be forced into wearing anything. So why would they not extend the same courtesy or same standard to Muslim women? Fair enough. As I said, if a Muslim woman doesn't have societal or family pressure, she should be allowed to wear it, but we shouldn't be endorsing it.
Yes, indeed. Well, and some of the family pressure might extend to what's known as gaslighting, mightn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I know that some very young girls at the same school as one of my daughters has been, persuaded that she's chosen to wear the hijab, when of course she's probably too young to know the significance of it and to make such an informed choice.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, that would come from either of the first three pressures that I just spoke about.
Yes.
There's no other way, and no one just wakes up one day and says, I want to wear a hijab. No non-Muslim woman would ever think about it. Can you imagine an Amazonian tribe woman wakes up one day and says, I want to wear a hijab?
Yeah.
It obviously comes from society, family, and religion, most importantly.
Yes, but the trouble with legislating about dress is where to put the barrier, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned Sikhs, and in this country, in the UK, it's perfectly all right for a Sikh man to wear his headdress as a bus driver or even in the army. And yet in Canada, for example, a law has just been passed, I should say in Quebec, one of the states of Canada, a law has just been passed that forbids anybody from wearing overt religious symbols whilst in the employment of the authorities. So a policeman, a judge, a street cleaner, a teacher is not allowed to have a cross round their neck or a capel on their head or face covering of any sort, because you can do that. They haven't taken away the entire freedom. They can do it in their own time, but while they're employed, they can't show their allegiance to a specific religion. And the thinking behind this is, if as a person of authority you display your affiliation, then you are giving out a message from the state that this is a good thing to be. And a secular state shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be endorsing any specific allegiance, any ideology, in the same way that it would be inappropriate for a teacher, and I'm an ex-teacher, to go into class wearing a great big Tory rosette. That wouldn't be accepted.
You're right. I mean, it is very difficult to draw the line. Obviously, there's this laïcité, this French model of secularism, and then there is, the rest of the Western world way of secularization. I am actually personally not in favor of. And I understand, look, governments do behave like private corporations, for example, police forces or whatever, so they can have their own rules. Just like that, any corporation can have their own rules, and they can have a dress code for the employees, and they can say, well, today's a form, 4 days a week you wear formal clothes, and then just on Friday you have casual Fridays.
Exactly.
So just like that, government can do it too. But I think governments. It does become a little bit trickier for government, because government does represent the whole country. So this is why I'm actually not in favor of for dictating dress codes. But I just thought about it now, as you said, that governments can also have they also operate like a private corporation, large private corporation.
Yes,
all of these they can have, if they can have a dress code, if they can have a uniform, why can't they say, well, you shouldn't wear a hijab, or you shouldn't wear a turban, or you shouldn't wear a rosary or something?
Yes. Well, if you worked, you mentioned that companies have their own dress code, and if you worked for Burger King, you wouldn't be allowed to wear your McDonald's T-shirt, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, so if you say that, okay, well, we are a Christian country, then you shouldn't be wearing anything that shows that you're or a Muslim dress code or Muslim symbols, displaying Muslim symbols. That would be like wearing a McDonald's T-shirt in a Burger King restaurant. So
yes, indeed,
I understand that. I think it is tricky. I actually never thought about it. But definitely, what I always held the view that if people are in their parks or whatever, if they're just roaming around freely, if they're not government employees, then states should have no business in telling people whether they can wear a hijab or they can't.
Absolutely. France. People have been mentioning France. I think you mentioned France. I got France in the comments here, and I'm going to have to screen some of the comments soon. Otherwise, our audience will get cheesed off. But France is rather more authoritarian than many Western states, isn't it? I mean, if you've been to France, you'll see that the police there usually carry a submachine gun, so they mean business, and their laws are much less liberal than here in the UK, for example.
Look, I mean, I've only been to Paris once, so I'm not really sure if I don't think I ever saw any police officer when I was in Paris. I was in Paris for about 3 days. Yes. So I don't think I saw anyone. I'm not really that familiar with French culture, so to speak, other than what we see in the movies, etc., or what I could grasp in those 3 days. I saw a lot of tourists. I saw a lot of snorty French people. They obviously don't like to speak English.
I'll tell them you said that.
but I was absolutely, I fell in love with Paris. I mean, I
Oh,
love the
yeah.
architecture, and it's so
Yeah,
beautiful. And I
yes,
do want to go to south of France. Next
yes.
time when I'm in Europe, I would definitely spend more time in France. But so I'm not really sure if I can actually say that they are not as liberal. I mean, there might be more conservative in the secularism, and that's what I keep hearing, that they are more authoritarian with the secularism.
Yes, yes. Well, for example, it's illegal to teach any sort of religion in their state schools.
Well,
Actually
right.
illegal. Yeah.
I'm not sure
Anyway.
if I hate that.
You
I
can
mean,
see-
I mean, we would obviously. I mean, you know, we have to stay logically consistent. And yes, I mean, I am obviously a fan of people should be allowed to believe and preach whatever they want. But again, with children, that's another tricky one, like you said about dress code.
yes,
People say to ex-Muslims that, oh, you know, you were too young at 15 to leave Islam. Well, how about being too young at birth to accept Islam?
yes, yes, indeed.
So that's even younger than that. When you're told when a mullah sings azan in your ear at your birth, and they announce that, you know, you are a Muslim. So
Now,
yeah, so that's even worse. But they know that we know that there's something about childhood indoctrination. If we don't teach people about religion until, you know, the ages of 16, 17, they're not likely to believe in it. If the parents legally tell them at 18, then okay, now you are a Muslim, it'd be like, well, you know, I don't think so. I don't buy that, because their mind would have already been conditioned with modern sciences and modern knowledge, as opposed to all the ridiculous stories from Islamic mythology.
Yes. Well, an acquaintance of mine, not a religious man, didn't know he was a Muslim until he applied for a passport. He's Kurdish. So he applied for a passport, and when he opened it and he read what they put, that's when he knew he was a Muslim.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Islam, that's another funny thing, that when I came to Australia, when I saw other Muslims, like Albanian Muslims, I was like, whoa, what kind of Muslims are these? I mean, my first landlord, he was Albanian Australian, and his daughters were, you know, they were wearing, you know, just really short shorts and everything. And I was like, whoa, okay, I thought you were Australian, you know. So, but they say, well, we are Muslims. I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of Muslim as well. But I obviously came from Pakistani Islam, which is slightly different from Saudi Arabian and Iranian Islam.
Yes, the culture is different. Yes. So I'm going to have to screen some of these poor people's comments, otherwise they're going to be very unhappy. So here we go. This is from, it looks like it might be from, no, what I posted that as the Wikipedia definition of what Islamophobia is. The fear of, the hatred of, prejudice against the religion of Islam or Muslims in general, especially when seen as a geopolitical force or the source of terrorism. Well, I think the problem there is that unlike some other religions, and you mentioned this earlier, Islam is very political. Where it's dominant, it tends to govern, which means that it becomes synonymous with a nationality, which is almost like being synonymous with a race. Therefore, people can get offended if you insult their religion, because effectively you're insulting them.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's exactly how I believe the term would have started, with the same notion. And Muslims bought that term because they feel like, they openly say that, especially in Pakistan. They say, well, you know, you can, if you attack Muhammad, or if you say anything negative about Muhammad, that's an attack on us as people. We are ready to lay down our lives for Muhammad. So they tie their identity with Islam itself. But the definition that you showed, prejudice towards the religion of Islam, what does that even mean? How can you have prejudice against an ideology? Like, I mean, can we say prejudice against fascism? can we say prejudice against communism or not? We can have opinions. There could be
Yeah.
bad opinions. You could argue that there could be bad opinions. But prejudice is something that I think that word should be reserved for people.
Yes. Yes.
We shouldn't be prejudiced towards people
Yes.
because obviously people are more dynamic.
Yes.
I understand an ideology like Islam as well. That could be very dynamic as well. You know, there's ISIS Islam, and then there is Turkish Islam and Albanian Islam, as I said. So yeah, but they're all quite conservative Islams. But people have watered it down. Muslims have watered it down to suit their local culture and environment, which is fine. So they can be dynamic, but the word prejudice, that definition should be fixed. I'll actually try to edit that, but I'm sure they'll correct it again. Prejudice against Muslims, that should be Islamophobia. But then people would be like, but Islam is not Muslim, you know. I mean, Muslims are people who follow Islam, so shouldn't the term be Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry or something like that? I think this was a major mistake when they popularized the term, but Muslims probably, even if they realize it, they just went with it for the reasons I mentioned, that they tie their identity with Islam.
Yeah, well, both of those words, Islamophobia and anti-Muslimism, they also exist. It's just that the one that's popular at the moment is Islamophobia. Now,
I just want on that note, I just want to say one more thing. I think it's very important that we come up with correct terms, because sooner or later, people. What would have been the purpose of coming up with a term like Islamophobia? To reduce hatred against Muslims, to reduce prejudice against Muslim. But what did it do? It divided people even more, because now people are debating about, you know, you shouldn't have called it Islamophobia, you should have called it Muslimophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry. Just like how this another fiasco that we can relate to is Black Lives Matter one, for example. I mean, I'm all for equal opportunity, and I'm very sympathetic towards people of color in America, especially in America, having to put up with prejudice for so many centuries. But now people are debating, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. I mean, that's not the conversation we should have been having, right? We should have been, and that's why I like Barack Obama in Joe Biden's campaign. He said, well, Black Lives Matter. Not more than anyone else, but not less either. So he tried to rectify it, but again, it was too late by then. So my point is, these terms should be very well thought out before they actually float them out, because they can pick up, and if they're not well thought out, they will be ripped apart by our very polarized world.
Good luck with getting them well thought out, though. I have a very simple attitude towards Black Lives Matter. I think that lives should matter and skin color shouldn't.
Yeah. That's good. But again, I mean, when we're dealing with aggrieved parties, like people who, for example, Black Americans, when they feel that they've been let down for so many centuries, and there's systemic, and then people try to water it down and try to simplify it, that, well, all lives should matter. I was listening to Ben Shapiro, where he was saying something like, and he made very good points, don't get me wrong, that at some point, a young 18-year-old black man has to make a decision that he's not going to go and shoot someone. Yes, I get that. But again, the environment around where he's grown up, and, his father went to jail, and his father went to jail, and he didn't have the kind of privileged lifestyle that some of the other Americans would have. So they, at the end of the day, I understand still what can we do? I mean, we can't solve this problem by throwing money into it. I mean, even if you gave everyone, $20,000 check or something, once they run out of that, they'll be back to square one. So obviously, there has to be a lot more. We need a lot more nuances in that than simply simplifying, and that's why I think people hate these absolutist terms, I would say.
Yes. It's just very tempting to go black or white. And we've seen so much of it. I mean, going back to George W. Bush, he famously said, "You're either with us or you're against us." Yeah,
I remember that. He did say that in 2001. I was in Pakistan at that time, and I was like thinking, oh, what are they going to do? I remember I spoke to my chemistry teacher, and I said, I asked him, I said, is America going to nuke us? and my teacher was like, no, there's no way. But he knew politics obviously better than me. He said, no, don't worry. Pakistan will be an ally of the United States, whether we like it or not. But I remember watching all those, at that time, obviously, there was no YouTube or anything in 2001. But I remember there was one scene from the Terminator 2 movie. I don't know if you remember where Sarah Connor is looking at her son playing in a park, and then there's a nuclear explosion, and then she just everything just and I had nightmares about that. I thought, well, is this what's going to happen in Lahore?
Yes.
Sorry, I went off topic there.
No, not at all. We can stray a little bit off topic. So what extent do you think, because as I said, I know very moderate Muslims, and they're sort of apostate in everything but name. But I also know of people, particularly in the Midlands here in the UK, who were moderate parents, but they raised children who got radicalized, went to fight for ISIS and got shot. What do you think about that? Is Islam a gateway drug to radicalization?
I think it is. I mean, we have plenty of other examples as well. I mean, I was talking about this in my couple of weeks ago in my stream as well, and I said, well, we have. How many more examples do we need? We have Pakistan in 50s and 60s was very liberated. My grandparents told us that. My parents tell me that when they were born in 50s and 60s, when they went to colleges and schools, there wasn't, people were quite free. And then something happened in the 80s, and yes, there was military dictatorship, but he used Islam. He Islamified Pakistan. We obviously know what happened in Iran. In 1979, we are now seeing in Indonesia and Malaysia. Human Rights Watch just issued a statement that Malaysia is getting further and further into Islamism and going to crack down more and more on LGBTQ. We know in Indonesia they are in the province of Aceh. They're caning people, in Turkey, the poster boy of modern Islam. And we see Islam coming back there as well. I mean, in the 21st century. Why is that happening? I think there's a last ditch effort by Islam. Obviously, Islam is not any conscious entity. But I think these are the dying breaths of Islam. I think this might be, throughout human history, we've gone up and down, up and down. Islam has reformed a little bit, but then it goes down again. Because the doctrine itself is very radical. It always has this potential of going back. I mean, as you said, the parents could be very moderate. They probably watched movies, and they didn't mind hanging out with infidels, and they didn't mind it. But their kids could always open up the Quran and look at it, where it clearly says that don't be friends with Christians and Jews, and you are better than them. And so anyone, if you read that book, if you're so this is why it's the poison pill that is always bound to come back. If those moderate parents had actually become atheists and they had not bothered to tell their kids that you are a Muslim, then this would not have happened.
Probably not.
But they insisted, because they were also fooled by their own culture or by their own upbringing, that Islam is a religion of peace, even though they didn't know anything about Islam themselves. So this Islam is a religion of peace. That's our identity. So they named their kids who were born in England, you're Abdul, you're Muhammad, and then when Abdul and Muhammad, when they felt any racial prejudice in amongst white British people, then they retracted inwards, and they would have. And I think Majid Nawaz, I'm just quoting Majid Nawaz or paraphrasing Majid Nawaz, because he said that that was one of his reasons of becoming a radical Muslim, because in the 90s when he felt bullied and like an outcast amongst white English boys, he thought that he had to find himself, and where else could he go? He wasn't going to relate to black English people, or he wasn't going to relate with the Asians, Chinese English. He was going to look into the other Muslim children,
Yes.
and that's when the sense of Islamic identity comes into play.
Mm.
And at that point, it doesn't matter how moderate or lenient or radical their parents were. You end up becoming, at your own journey, because of your own journey, you end up becoming a radical Muslim. And Islam has that potential. This is the reason why people can say that all they want, that Islam is a religion of peace. But why is it that we keep seeing over and over again? And you're right. We've seen so many of them in my family as well. I've seen all my uncles and aunties were regular Muslims.
Mm.
Again, Islam is peace kind of people, but I'm sure they never read the Quran with Urdu or English translation. But some of my cousins turned out to be very fundamentalist. Like big beards. Nobody had beard in any of my uncles and any of my uncles on my father or mother's side. But a lot of my cousins ended up growing the beards and becoming really radical Muslims.
Yes, yes. Well, it goes down the generations too, doesn't it? Because even if the parents have been moderate, sometimes these teenage young men mostly can relate to their grandparents, who maybe were the original immigrant population and brought a lot stronger Islam to bear on the situation.
Well, with Pakistanis, what I would say that our grandparents were even more
yes,
they were even less Islamic, because they were more they grew up under British rule.
Yes, yes.
If you want to specifically talk about India subcontinent Muslims,
Yeah.
my grandfather, my grandmother, yes, they were all Muslims, but they were very liberated to a point that they all sent their girls to schools and colleges and universities. My mother, masters in history. My other auntie was also a master's in history. I think my third auntie, she did. I think she didn't do masters, but she did her bachelor's degree in something. They were all well educated, and that's because our grandparents were like, okay, we're going to teach our daughters.
Yes.
But then, however, later on, something else happened. Again, that's the poison pill of Islam that keeps coming back.
Yes, yes. Well, you're right. At that stage, Pakistan was very British culture oriented. And the same goes for Iran, because, of course, it used to be Persia and quite westernized. But even today, we hear that there's been a military coup in Myanmar, and what's the name?
San Aung San
Suu Kyi, yes,
yeah,
has been arrested, and her government has been deposed.
Yeah. Well, and that's after I think she spent something like 20 years in house arrest or something.
Yes.
And that's when democracy came back, and obviously that's
election.
Yeah, she won election, but I'm not a big fan of her either. I mean, I had really high hopes of her, but then she went totally silent on Uyghur, so not Uyghur, sorry. What's the name of the community? The Myanmar Muslims. I forgot the name. Jeez, that's embarrassing. But yeah, so she went totally quiet on that. She didn't say anything about the genocide of Muslims in Myanmar.
She disappointed a lot of us.
Rohingya Muslims.
That's ones, yes. And you reminded me now of Imran Khan, the great cricketer, fantastic cricketer, who was very UK culture oriented, and now he's pandering to the Muslim sect in Pakistan.
It's a little bit more dynamic than that, but I still, we all have been very disappointed by him.
Yes.
I was very hopeful. I lived my entire 90s hoping that one day he will become a prime minister.
Yeah.
But he has been a disappointment, and he himself has gone through a bit of a journey. I don't know whether you've read his book, Pakistan, My Personal History. Well, actually read that. It's quite interesting. It takes you through his life. But there was one critical point in his life when I believe in the 90s he met this mystic guy or something, and then that's when he found God again. That happened in the 90s, and obviously he went through this traumatic experience of his mother dying through cancer, and because of her, he made this cancer hospital that's been an enormous success against all odds. So he did some really amazing things, but at the same time, like he was entering in a different phase of life. He was no longer a playboy. He married Jemima Goldsmith. I think even at that point he was like, okay, I'm a Westerner. And it's funny that now he criticizes those people like me, basically, which would be people like him in his youth. That we are like brown sahib. Like we are brown white people. Like we want to be like Westerners, but we are actually brown people, and we have forgotten our roots. Which is one of the things that I actually really despise. That this kind of tribalism that is parroted by politicians. That dividing lines. I mean, why can't anyone live like a Western lifestyle? I mean, I don't even call it a Western lifestyle. I call it a modern human. It's a modern human lifestyle. Westerners don't own the modern definition of human rights or democracy. Yes, you can argue that maybe it originated in ancient Greece, but secularism originated in ancient Persia under Cyrus the Great. So do we call secularism a Western value as well? No, that would be. So these are human values that have evolved over centuries and even millennia, and we should all be proud of. So if one brown Pakistani thinks that, okay, that is a better form of government, I agree with that definition of human rights. Don't taunt me by calling me a coconut or or Uncle Tom or something like that. Just because I intellectually, I buy that worldview better than yours, and just for the sake of it, just for the sake of my skin color, I have to show my allegiance to the rotten ideas of subcontinent for some matter. And obviously, subcontinent is very diverse as well. We have Indian, Hindu culture as well. So why should I be? And as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan is only 70 years old. My grandfather is older than Pakistan. So I don't owe any allegiance to any flag for that matter. But Imran Khan has been a disappointment in that regard because he went inward. Some people had a conspiracy theory that he did that to become a prime minister. But no, I think people can't really put on a facade for that long. I think they to some extent they do believe in it, even if they force themselves to believe in it because it's convenient. So, but he is a Muslim, but he's not. I'm still not going to buy that he's a radical Muslim. He doesn't. He does buy the idea of secularism and minorities of Pakistan should be protected. Ahmadis should not be persecuted. In the name of Islam, he believes in those things, but again, it needs a lot of courage and spine and big balls to stand up to the clergy in Pakistan.
People don't understand how difficult it is to be a prime minister. You're only there by the agreement of your underlings, as it were, and you've got to sort of juggle all the different opinions that they have and steer your way through while staying in control. It's an impossible job. Who would want that? I think we ought to say hello to some of our audience because we've got quite a large audience here. So we've got Hindus leave ex-Muslims alone. That's the name of this person. He says hi. We've got Salim Sheikh who says hi. Hi, Salim. Nice to have you in the audience. We've got my friend, the African Humanist. Hello, African Humanist. And then we've got, who's this? Says who? No, that's not in the thread. Oh, this is Jar Jar Binks from Philippines. Hello, Jar Jar. We've got a lot of them. Mostly they're chatting to each other here rather than asking us the question. So I'm going to try and pick out some more. Somebody who says there are many inhumane rules in Islam. I don't think either of us will disagree with that, will we, Harris?
Yeah. I don't think so.
So going on, looking at more of the, here we go. People should be free to believe whatever they want without anyone attacking. Freedom of religion, speech and expression. Again, I think we're on the same side there, African Humanist.
Yeah, I think it's the other side that needs to understand that. They think that freedom of speech um, it comes with a condition. So saying anything about their religion would be taking unfair advantage of freedom of speech, and that's not what they should what should be allowed. So they start putting conditions on freedom of speech. I actually think that all of these things can coexist. All of these ideas simultaneously can exist. We can you can be free to believe in whatever you want, but at the same time we can criticize it as well. But people who want to practice their religion don't want to be criticized. So they don't want freedom of speech, but we can have freedom of speech and freedom to believe in whatever you want.
Well, the fact that they don't want to be criticized indicates the lack of foundation of their belief system to me.
Well, but most of it, I mean, they don't understand their own religion either. I mean, there's so many people who've been coming after me for a long time now. So, but none of them, these people don't know anything about Islam at all. I mean, when I show them some of the hadiths and the verses of the Quran, they're totally shocked. They don't even know because they've had their own Islam in their mind that was given to them by their parents, by some common word in the street, and they thought, oh, this is it. I'll tell you a really funny story. Like, I mean, one thing that really troubled me for a very long time was when I actually discovered the concept of sex slavery. I brought that up quite a few times in the past as well, and I still can't get my head around it. How the most merciful person, the person who was sold to us as the best role model for all humanity, and the best person who ever lived, how could he murder men and then sleep with their wives by nighttime?
Yes,
I just cannot get my head around it. I mean, no matter how much of a hornbag you could be, that can never be sold or passed around as a good or a noble deed. It just can't be. But Muhammad did that. So I had already become an atheist because my influence was obviously by a lot of people of my generation, by Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, etc., who never really focused on Islam in their books. But it was just the atheistic arguments. But then after that, armed with those arguments, after that I looked into Islam more carefully. That's when I discovered, oh boy, it's worse than I thought.
Yes, yes, even worse than the Bible.
I think it was Sam Harris's quote. He said the Old Testament might have been the worst book ever written, only if it wasn't for the Quran.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, look, I think the Old Testament and the Quran probably, in some aspects, they're just as bad as each other. Obviously, the New Testament is very benign, which is actually quite surprising. Again, I don't want to sound like an apologist or go into soft on Christianity. Christianity is just as ridiculous as far as being stupid is concerned. But we can't say that it's violent. It's not as violent. I mean, and you got to remember, these people. I mean, that Bible, New Testament, was written in the Roman era. Which was still a very brutal society by today's standards.
Yes,
but it was still a civilization, I believe. So it probably might not have been as brutal as 7th century Arabia, for that matter.
Wow.
So I mean, that literature, or those books will reflect the environment of the time, and I think that's what we see. And the Old Testament would have been written in even more ancient times, Egyptian times and Sumerian times, and then obviously they were definitely more barbaric than the latter civilizations.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm just randomly clicking on some of these comments here that people have put in. Learn Islam, its prophecies, its historical and scientific miracles, the prophetic life and the miracles, the endless testimonies. Learn all these things, the linguistics of the Quran. It sounds like we have a supporting Muslim amongst us.
Yeah, that's fine. Abu Hizab, you can read my book. I've actually discussed a lot of those topics in my book. So, and you can watch my videos. I do pull these arguments apart one by one. So
I will link to your book and the video and your YouTube's in the details underneath this when it becomes a podcast in a few minutes' time. Somebody here, John R. Hrabowski, says 47 years of mental torment gone. I think he's just left his religion.
Right.
So what have we got? The Queen again. She doesn't wear a headscarf because men tell her to.
Yeah, well, that's a key information.
Yes, indeed. It's
a key piece of information. Yeah.
It's in fact, it's strange how so many religions are all about what men want.
Yeah.
So I'll try to find some more here. Why should a religion dictate what people should wear? Good question.
Because all religions come with some sort of a moral code. That is why it's the biggest argument that religious apologists give you, that, okay, well, if you remove religion, where are you going to get your morals from? So, how much skin you should show, how you should behave in public. Apparently, all of that comes under some sort of a moral guideline, that you should have some sort of a moral compass. And since these people can't come up or are incapable of coming up with their own moral compass, they need an ancient book to tell them that.
Yeah. It puzzles me that Muslim men seem to be less able to control their urges than those in other parts of the world, and they need their women to be protected from them. What's going on there?
Yeah, look, I mean, it happens when you create a very sexually repressive society. When I was a kid, I remember it would have been in the 90s or something. I saw that for a very long time, I actually believed that, I might have just dreamed it. I think I was just probably 9-10-year-old at that time. But I very recently I spoke to my mom about it. I said, "Mom, did that really happen?" And she said, "Yeah, don't you remember that? There's a place in Lahore. It's a very posh area called Fortress Stadium. Back in the 90s, when foreign tourists would come, they would go there because and I remember there was this Western woman, and again in the 90s, Western people were a rarity. Pakistan was just it was a deep breath before the explosion of Islamization of Pakistan. But even though that was happening in the background, a lot of sectarian violence was happening, and in the 80s, Islamization of Pakistan happened. So now we were going to see that in the 2000s.
Yes.
So I'm assuming it would have been 93, 94 at that time. And I was with my mother going to buy. There was a shopping center there. So I saw this Western woman. She was wearing a skirt up to her knees, obviously, and so you could see knee below. And she was walking, and there was a shop owner. I still remember his face, and I just thought that maybe I dreamed it or something. He literally was like this.
Yes. Well,
his eyes were really, and I was also a boy, but instead of me, I just had to look at the girl just a little bit, and then I was just looking at his eyes because they were just like this big.
Well, if you've been brought up in a repressive society where you're not allowed to mingle with women, even in school, you're kept separate. There's no co-ed, is there? And
I know, I actually did go to a co-ed school. I mean, I went to Cathedral School, which was actually run by not run by you guys, but it was run by Christians. But the British, they were built in the old, British rule, under British rule. So they had these long, big cathedrals there, very beautiful buildings there, and some British people had built it there, and some British people would come every year. From time to time, they'd come there just for whatever. So over there we had co-education. So I mean, we sat with girls, so we were a little bit more open-minded, but we were still teenage boys.
you were lucky. It won't happen anymore. And the trouble is, if you've been brought up exclusively in your sex, the tendency is to think of the other sex as some sort of alien, not to understand them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look back now and I think, it was still a very conservative country, and obviously, like there were no boyfriends and girlfriends, but there were friendships. We would talk and we would blush. I spoke with that girl, and like all of that. But now I look back, I'm like, yeah, okay, well that did work for us to some extent. That like when we went into professional lives, we weren't really, look, there's a woman there. We weren't like that.
I can remember back when this country was more misogynistic than it now is, when girls in the sort of short skirts that you've talked about could walk down the street and men on the scaffolding of a building site would whistle at them and the girls would quite like it because they were obviously attracting the attention they wanted.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some YouTube videos where people say that there's catcalling culture and women have been shaming these people, especially in New York or something. But I spoke to my partner. I've never witnessed that here in Australia, and when I was in London as well, I didn't witness it there either. But I've heard in America it's definitely a lot worse for some reason. I don't know why that is, but whatever, But obviously, I hope we'll get better.
Well, progress is being made if you believe the book by Steven Pinker. Have you his latest book? Is it or the one before? He's written a book on how things have been getting progressively better for the last 2,000 years. So we shouldn't lose hope.
Yeah.
We've got lots of comments still coming in here. I'm not going to be able to show them all before we run out of time because this program ends in about 3 minutes.
What about you?
For watching. You were going to say?
Katie, okay, well, what is she saying? Black lives don't matter with many Desi people. Desi people is a word for people of subcontinent origin. Dark skin is looked down upon and treated less than unattractive. It happens. Yeah, she made a very good point. In our culture, in subcontinent, people invest a lot of money on fairness creams.
Yes.
Nobody wants to look darker. When women go out to look for brides for their sons, the first requirement is the girl needs to be fair skinned.
Yes.
So there are some really cruel nicknames for people with darker skin color.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean there's a lot of racism amongst brown people.
And don't try the skin lightening creams; they don't work and they do cause harm. So, but what we're talking about now, is what Darwin called sexual selection.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can't get away from it. And the reason that a lot of people in Northern Europe have blue eyes is because women
kept mating with women with blue eyes. Yeah, that's right.
Women like that. Yes.
Yeah, it does happen. So some of us brown boys have to really work on our charms in that case, because we don't have the blue eyes.
Well, I can tell you don't have a problem.
When are we going to talk about the petition that I made against?
Let's do it. We're going to have to stop putting up the comments because we're running out of time. But thank you, all you commenters. Thank you very much for your interaction with this show. Now, go ahead, Harris. I'm just going to take this last comment down so that we can all see you and I'll full screen you.
Well, right. So I'll share my screen. Most of you, you probably have to add that share screen that I've got it at the bottom.
Yep, I can do that.
Right. So this is, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this gentleman, if we can call him that, Ali Dawah, who has openly said that ex-Muslims, apostates of Islam should be killed, and he is proud of that, and he will be watching when people like us get executed. And he, in that video, you can go and watch the video. I'm not going to play that video here because he might send you a strike. He has also condoned child marriages. He has said on record that if his daughter was 9 years old and she wanted to get married, he would marry her off to any man, even if he's 52 years old, just like Prophet Muhammad and Aisha Aisha's marriage. So I'm all for freedom of speech. A lot of ex-Muslims are not really supporting me because they're saying, "Oh, well, you're promoting the cancel culture and you are suppressing his free speech." But I thought that we always said that freedom of speech, the only line that we cannot cross in freedom of speech is promotion of violence. He has done it both. He has done promotion of violence and also harmed children. It's not him just randomly saying it. He has a large audience. He has already contaminated the minds of so many people living in Western countries. How many of these followers that he has live in UK, Australia, America, Canada, and those people now believe that yes, ex-Muslims should be killed. It takes only one of those people to just go and take the matters into their own hands, because they know that Australia is never going to become Islamic Republic of Australia. Therefore, it's never going to execute Harris. So that's the kind of narrative these guys have been peddling for a very long time. So I think it would be fair to cancel people like Ali Dawah for his horrible views like this. So I'm asking all of those who agree with my point of view to go to this, just Google Ali Dawah petition. You'll see the second one, hate preacher Ali Dawah coming to Australia. So I'm trying to get him barred from entering Australia. So far we have nearly, just over 2,000 signatures. So let's get to 2,500. If you guys can sign it, obviously, if you agree with me, then please share that and promote it.
Well, I'll certainly promote that, because I agree. Cancel culture in general is a bad thing, but hate is a different matter. And here in the UK, we have imprisoned a couple of hate preachers. Harris, you have been utterly fantastic. Thank you very much for taking part in this show. Take care. Look after yourself. See you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.